Hello, and welcome to Psychedelic Chat, the Open Nurses monthly interview series. Today, I have the honor of interviewing co-founder of Open Nurses, Angela Ward. Angela Ward, BSN, RN, CPTR, Soul Midwife, and nurse coach, is the lead coach at Guardian at the Gateway, which supports people on their healing journey using nurse coaching and psychedelic-informed therapy approaches. Originally a labor and delivery nurse, she has dedicated her career to bringing safe and legal psychedelic medicine as a tool to help people heal in a deep way. She has many hours logged supporting people through expanded states of consciousness, as well as extensive training in psychedelic-assisted therapy, and is a member of the leadership circle for our organization of psychedelic and entheogenic nurses. She's currently working one-on-one or in groups with clients who are courageously awakening through transformational experiences, taking their healing into their own hands, as well as teaching the next wave of psychedelic nurse coaches and psychedelic doulas. You can learn more at her websites, guardianatthegateways.com, and you can also apply for her psychedelic doula application. It's my great pleasure to welcome Angela.
Hello, Wendy.
Hi.
It's so fun hearing someone else read your bio and go like, wow, sounds pretty amazing. Thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, so welcome. We've got some people live here. If you want to pop into the chat where you're watching from, that would be great. And if you have any questions, we can answer them at the end.
Yeah, looks like someone specifically is saying hello to you, Wendy.
All right. All right, so let's get started here. So Angela, why don't you tell me about the trajectory of your nursing career? How did you get involved with psychedelics?
Oh boy. So the trajectory of my nursing career, I started as a doula. I was fascinated with birth. Interestingly, I came to birth through working with horses. My aunt raised thoroughbreds, and I was always amazed at how easily mares foaled their babies and no problem, and had heard so much about women struggling with this. So I was like, what's the deal? So I became a doula and supported women in birth, which I absolutely loved. And through a personal tragedy, the birth and death of my child, I was encouraged by the people that helped care for her during her short life to maybe pursue nursing. I had a grandmother that was a nurse and had never really considered it as a possibility for myself, but decided, why the heck not? And why not work in labor and delivery, because I had such a heart for it. And I also was really longing to create a space for families that might be in a situation like mine, maybe birthing children that might not have the opportunity to live long or might have different diagnoses that were challenging. And I wanted to bring as much of that more sacred, natural birth approaches to a more medicalized setting. So I've done that for a really long time prior to the psychedelic work. And then was really inspired to join the Certificate in Psychedelic-Assisted Therapy and Research program, where I met you and our other awesome co-founders.
Right.
And was just so inspired by that work and the potential for healing. I was and still remain very interested in working with these medicines for bereavement. At the end of that training, I enrolled in Dr. Wolfson's ketamine training at the encouragement of my mentor. And just prior to that experience of going to the training where we were going to do ketamine, I had a really difficult outcome at the hospital, which had re-exacerbated my trauma of losing my own child. And luckily, I knew you and so many other amazing people from CIIS that kind of supported me in processing that trauma and really pointed out that I was suffering from my PTSD being exacerbated. So I was able to do a lot of work. But then I went to the ketamine training and I had my first experience with ketamine. And it was really impactful because I hadn't realized how shitty I'd been feeling until I wasn't feeling so shitty anymore. Like day and night. Right. Sorry, I swear a little bit. I don't know if we can swear on the Open Nurses thing.
Yeah, it's our podcast. So.
We can say what we want. Sorry, I'll try to do a little bit. We're nurses. We got the bedpan humor. So but that just blew my mind at how powerful ketamine work was. So since then, I have transitioned into working with ketamine assisted coaching I've also become a nurse coach, which is a board certification we can now get as nurses. And that allows me to work with clients one-on-one and in group settings to bring them into doing ketamine-assisted therapy, with the hope that as we continue to move this work forward, I'll be able to work with other medicines. But we'll see how that goes.
That's great. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about nurse coaching, because that's a relatively new area, and we have nurses tuning in who maybe don't know what nurse coaching is.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I took my training through the Nurse Coach Collective in Portland. It is a newer board certification that allows us to work one-on-one or in groups with people to help move them towards their health goals and help actualize their well-being. And the future of healthcare is really has got to be in wellness and in preventative medicine, because if no time like the present to see how overwhelmed our hospital system is with caring for trauma and caring for people that are already in a really chronic illness state. So a nurse coach is able to work more one-on-one and help move people in the direction of wellness. I think that I'm a little unique in that I'm doing the psychedelic assisted therapy component with this coaching and moving them in the direction of healing. And of course, it's all legal, above ground. It's supervised by an MD. But I find it really impactful. It allows people to, as nurses, we already are so good at being advocates for patients and meeting our patients where they're at, helping them find ways to bring in health and well-being at a pace that they can sustain, or in a way that actually works for them, instead of coming from a real prescriptive place. We help people kind of experiment and figure out what works for them. And that is what I really love about nurse coaching. The training I did allows me to sit for 2 separate board certifications, which I have yet to do. But ultimately, at the end of that process, you can be board certified as a health and wellness nurse coach. So we'll see how that goes.
That's great. Yeah. So do you think nurses bring a different perspective to psychedelic therapy work?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Right.
I think that's one of the reasons that we started this organization. I think there's a lot that nurses bring that are unique to our profession. One is that we have a capacity of being with people at whatever state that they're in. We also are pretty grounded in the face of what may appear to be a pretty wild situation, like birth, for example, can just look so wild to an outsider and might actually seem like, very intense and high panic, high stress situations. But we get really grounded in normal expressions of wildness or expanded states of consciousness. And we have a real clear discernment for when something is shifting, maybe from being a kind of normal expression into a pathological, or maybe kind of treading on dangerous territory. So I think that is really a lovely skill set that we bring. We also work with such a wide population of people across ages and stages and socioeconomic arenas that I think we have the ability to connect very quickly with people and build trust and rapport. I'm not saying that's unique to our profession, but it is something that we have to do every time we go to work, right? You get who you get assigned at your session, and you get to care for them and know them really intimately. We take care of people in their most vulnerable times. And another part that I think we bring that is so important to me, and I know that we've worked on a lot in Open Nurses, is our code of ethics and our kind of moral compass in the work that we do. Every nurse I know takes a lot of pride in having that foundation, especially the foundation of our, nurse foremothers and forefathers that helped to develop all of these things. And I think that just gives such a nice, rooted, grounded place to work from.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And we are the most trusted profession, right? Even though other professions are highly trusted as well. But nurses year after year come up as the most trusted.
Yeah. And we have a license to touch, which I think is really unique. And we I hope if you're a nurse working in any profession, you have some trauma-informed care. I think many of us do, and understand how to get permission to take care of people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an area that's kind of lacking in the psychedelic conversation,
Mm-hmm.
is consent and therapeutic touch and kind of negotiating that level of consent together.
Right. Yeah. So, what advice would you give to a nurse who's interested in psychedelics?
I think it would be really great for a nurse interested in working with psychedelics to spend time working with people in expanded states of consciousness. And that doesn't have to be with people that are tripping, although there's plenty of opportunities to volunteer if festivals come back, to work with those folks. But being able to sit with people in birth, as they're dying, as they're going through pretty intense healing and recovery experiences, I think can just teach us so much.
Mm-hmm.
And also how to take care of our bodies in those spaces, like spending hours at the bedside holding a leg of someone who's got an epidural and pushing forever. Like, you learn a lot about just kind of basic managing yourself in those longer stretches of time. And if a nurse's goal is to be able to work as a psychedelic therapist at some point, that's going to be long hours. And I think it's really good to learn how to pace ourselves, how to stay really, to take care of ourselves on all levels, on that psycho, spiritual, emotional, physical way.
Mm-hmm.
So time at the bedside.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we do 12-hour shifts sometimes, standard nursing shift.
Yeah.
Gotta learn to pace yourself, right?
Yeah. And how to hold your bladder for a while.
Yeah.
Not that that's always great, and I think another place that's important for nurses to learn is to work with various populations and have a better understanding of where people are coming from. For me, working in birth, I had the privilege of working at a public hospital that served a huge variety of population, refugees and immigrants and wealthy people and poor people and everybody across the radar. And there was such a humanizing aspect of being at birth with people
Mm-hmm.
from all of those walks of life, being able to find the core thread of people when they're going through these experiences, I think helps keep us humble in this work, but also really responsive in the work too. And I imagine in the work that you're doing too, with people going through their healing crises, some of that external shit just melts away. And you're just
What
caring for a
really
human.
matters, right, when you're in that moment. Yeah. So birth or death or anywhere in between.
Yeah.
So how do you envision nurses in the future of this psychedelic therapy and research?
Well, my fantasy is, of course, training more of me, more psychedelic nurse coaches that will be able to, use our trusted voices to advocate for patients, to work with patients directly as they're moving through this field or through this healing modality, whether that be doing preparation and integration work or simply discussing harm reduction strategies, all the way to actually guiding, as well as research. Really, I think you've said that we are the Swiss Army knife of healthcare. So I think nurses fit in all of these areas, especially, there's a lot of places to be called to. So I can see them fitting in many places. And I think there's going to be a great need. There is a great need. There's a lot of people that want support and want to work through these, especially as we might be moving into medicalization to some degree. I think that we are really powerful bridge builders between, not everybody's going to be able to do their ceremony in Peru and in the jungle. Some people are going to require some type of medical supervision or a little more containment. And I think that we are the ideal people to support patients in that place.
Right. Yeah, physically and emotionally we can support. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Okay, let's see. So since we're kind of a nursing specific audience here, Do you ever worry about backlash from employers or licensing agencies? Like, what are you doing to protect your license? And you're working with ketamine. You can explain a little more about that.
Yeah. Well, ketamine is legal, and I am not prescribing it, nor am I working with it privately, meaning I'm not administering ketamine on my own or anything like that. I'm an RN. I'm not a prescribing provider, which I think gives a little layer of protection to me in a way, because the clients I work with, I can at least do the screening portion to kind of rule out whether or not there's some red flags that would not make them appropriate for that. But if they are, then they have a secondary screening by the medical provider that has the prescribing authority. And then our ketamine sessions are done in clinic with me and the medical supervision on site. So he's not in the room. He's not like, people aren't hooked up to beeping machines. It's very, we try to make it as sacred as possible, but there's still a watchful eye nearby. I've never had any problems, knock on wood, but never needed an intervention in that way. So I feel really supported in that I'm working inside a community, and that we have policies and procedures and all that stuff, documentation about how we're working with people. As far as my nursing board, I am trusting the blessing of this work to keep me safe there. I'm trying to stay, I'm not out in the parking lot selling tabs of acid at a dead show or something on my off time. I'm trying to really, keep this is important work to me, and to all of us in open. This is really important. So I think standing behind our nursing, all of the values that we carry as nurses, I think will help to protect this.
Right. So yeah.
Fingers crossed too.
Right. And I mean, you're committed right now, you're working in an above ground setting, and right. So within a clinic with a doctor, and yeah. So hopefully in the next year or two, right, where they're working on getting MDMA and psilocybin through the FDA. So fingers crossed we can expand our repertoire. Yeah.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that.
Okay. Let's see. How about story time? So tell us a story about how others view you or react to you when they learn you're a nurse working and contributing to this field. Was there ever a time someone responded negatively or like with shock to you that you work with psychedelics?
It's so interesting because the evolving of my practice has been slow. It's not just like overnight I started doing this work. I was working full time in the hospital when I started going to CPTR, the CIS training with you guys. And I was pretty shy about it. I didn't really let people know much about it. And over time, especially when I was still working there, I would start kind of letting out bits of information. And I think there was a reputation for sure going around that like, there's that weirdo psychedelic nurse. But interestingly, as more and more evidence is coming out, and as I transitioned into working with ketamine, these nurses themselves have come to do ketamine assisted therapy or send their children, adult children to come do ketamine assisted therapy. And I think having those nurses that could then go back and speak to the others, like this was impactful for me, is shifting the tide a bit. I think there was much more openness and curiosity about it. And especially when you look at nurses using this for healing. In fact, I just heard of a study. I don't know if you guys saw that there's a study at the University of Washington, I'm in Seattle, that will be doing a psilocybin assisted study for healthcare workers with secondary trauma. And like,
I just saw that they're currently recruiting for participants.
Yes.
I think maybe they're doing 30 people, I think so. Something. And psilocybin for people, frontline workers with COVID trauma, essentially.
Yeah. How impactful.
Wonderful that they could get that through already. Yeah.
Yes, I'm really excited about that. And I wish there was more we could do for one another in this way. I know a lot of us, not me, luckily, but a lot of you all have worked through some really difficult experiences. And I think this might be a way to help process some of that without a stigma.
Right. A great pilot study. Yeah, back to how the tides have really shifted. We were all in the CPTR program. That was 2017, and just in the couple of years since then, and then Michael Pollan's book came out, and just the tides have shifted. But I remember, the CPTR program at CIIS. We can put a link in the chat later. But it's only for licensed professionals in medical, nursing, or therapy, or clergy, and it's within a university. It was the only psychedelic certificate at the time that existed. And I remember being able to tell my manager at the hospital that I need time off work to go to this retreat for school, on psychedelics. And this is real, right? This is a real academic program, and it's on the top of my CV. And it was just so wonderful to be able to have that be legitimized, and be in an academic container.
Yes. And I also think, well, my union helped pay for it. They gave me $500, which was super cool because it had CEs attached to it. Mm-hmm. But the thing that was so exciting for me was at the time, and this kind of blows my mind that how little time has truly passed, but in 2017, it still was kind of whispered talking about psychedelic work, and coming into that training together with all of you and being like, oh, we can talk about psychedelics freely here. We can have a deeper conversation instead of worrying if someone's going to really critique us based on that. We were past that threshold. We could just be like, let's talk about the research. Let's talk about the ethics. Right. Let's talk about access. Let's talk about equity. So very exciting times. Right. And it's just amazing to see how it's blossomed in just a few years, really.
Right. Yeah, I too have a lot of coworkers coming up to me because some of the earlier studies were also I work with cancer patients, and they were with cancer patients looking at end-of-life anxiety. So a lot of my coworkers were quite interested in how we can better serve our patients.
Yeah.
So,
and they deserve it. Right. I wish we could move these things along because people can't wait. They really can't.
Right. But it's on the way. Stay strong.
Ketamine in the meantime and see if that works.
Right. Let's see. Another question here. So she sort of answered this one already. Is whether you feel nurses need an advanced degree to work in this area, and you're forging ahead with your RN degree, and I think you're a wonderful role model for that.
I mean, it's a tricky conversation because I don't think we're asking the right question here. I think what we need to ask is, what role do you as a nurse want to play in this emerging field? Mm-hmm. Because when I first came in, and I have to say it's taken a couple of years for me to get over that I'm not a therapist and I'm still welcome in this arena. For a long time, this work was really the territory of therapy. And I absolutely think that's an important and valuable part of psychedelic assisted work. Yet, nurses have such a range of ability to work in this space that I don't know that it's degree specific. So if you are someone who wants to be a prescribing provider and maybe work on studies more, probably having a more advanced degree is going to help. And I don't think if had I not known about nurse coaching, I maybe would have pursued an advanced degree, but I'm old and I don't got time to go back to school for 3 years. Are you kidding me? Or money. And yet I was so inspired by Annie Mithofer and Karen Cooper, that have been some of our initial speakers, are both RNs. They're BSN RNs. They are not advanced practice degrees, and they're working at the bedside with people doing this work.
Right. So and doing research. Yeah.
And doing research.
Both,
absolutely. Yeah. So there is a way, I think. I think there is a way, but I think it's really important for nurses to have some clarity about what it is that they're called to do in this work, and maybe come at it, reverse engineer it from that. If your interest is really being in the research branch, then how might you get there? If you're interested in working at the bedside with people in certain different ways, is it ketamine trainings that you need to do? Is it a nurse coach training that you need to do? So I know that's not a really clear yes or no answer, but I think our conversation is more nuanced than a simple yes or no.
Yeah, so we've already mentioned several different trainings. You've mentioned there's many different ketamine trainings. There's the CPTR training we did. There's nurse coaching. Are there any other trainings you'd recommend or skills people might want to pick up while we're waiting for this? Yeah.
Skills. Well, I'm in this first year of the synthesis psychedelic practitioners training. So I'm doing that right now also. I've seen more and more places opening up for different kinds of training. And I think it really depends on what you're interested in. I think Hakomi is a fascinating approach. I think the Psychedelic Somatic Institute is doing some really interesting body-based work and working with cannabis-assisted therapy, which is a whole other option we haven't really talked about too, as far as getting to psychedelic work with ketamine. I wonder about, oh gosh, there's just so much potential here. Like if someone wanted to learn more about art therapy or movement therapy or expressive voice therapy or, holistic, functional medicine, I think, and psychedelic assisted therapy would be really a beautiful blend. So it's not, I don't have a clear answer either, right?
Right.
I think, what are you called to? What are people called to in this work? And then also, I think there's a time and place where I don't know that you need more education. There might come a time where you actually need to start working with people. And that might not necessarily be in a psychedelic state, but that could still be working with helping people, coaching people, helping people learn how to set goals and achieve them, kind of basic stuff, or volunteering at Fireside Project and actually talking to people as they're struggling in their psychedelic experiences. I think there's plenty of opportunity to kind of follow the lead of what interests you.
Right. So just clarify. So Fireside is a psychedelic peer support hotline that people can look up. You can call if you're having a difficult experience or if you want to process an experience that already happened. So that's a great chance for people to volunteer. There's also the Zendo Project, which many of us have volunteered, which goes to festivals and has kind of another peer support model where you help people having challenging experiences with or without psychedelics.
Yeah.
So those are great opportunities to work with people who are altered. Without
there's plenty. I mean, I've even done street medic stuff at protests and get a lot of experience out there in the field as well.
Right. Great. Let's see. So what kind of advocacy role do you see nurses taking in terms of maybe changing laws or policies, harm reduction, anything sort of nurse-specific advocacy? Yeah.
Gosh, so many things. Well, I think it's important for us to be aligned with the Students for Sensible Drug Policy. I think that would be really great. I think that we need to have a better understanding of like addiction in general as nurses. I think that we also need to have a better understanding of probably of cannabis and different places where it's decriminalized or legalized, so we can kind of get rid of some of the stigma around those things and also be able to educate people around appropriate use. Working in the hospital, we'd have patients come in with cannabis hyperemesis syndrome where they just gotten to a place where they're smoking so much pot it makes them vomit, and then they think that smoking more pot will make them not vomit, and it just gets this horrible cycle, but no one ever told them. Right. I think that is another place where we as nurses can advocate, is helping educate. It's so important because we live in a country where if it's big, it's good. If it's bigger, it's better. That doesn't mean taking higher doses of psychedelics. It doesn't mean smoking more cannabis. It's like helping people to understand, what's their intention, how to be safe doing this work. Politically, I think it's important to speak to our family members or communities about this as well. The drug war has been absolutely terrible for our country, and especially for people of color. And I think that it has really bled over into the nursing profession in many ways. I've definitely worked with nurses that have pretty strong opinions about people coming in and making judgments about who they might be based on what drug they may or may not be using, which is
Right.
not really helping anybody heal, like that's a whole conversation around political advocacy. But I think together as nurses, there's a lot of areas that we could address collectively and could really help create a safe and sustainable and accessible approach to psychedelic therapy for all people.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Wendy?
Yeah.
I
Well,
want to know what you think.
I mean, I do think that the harm reduction education is critical. Knowledge is power, and people like with all different medical conditions, but also with substance use. And how you mentioned cannabis, right? And that is becoming legal in many states now for recreational use, beyond even medical use. Recreational use, people are trying this. And if you can give them some basic guidelines for how to stay safe, it's also a great opportunity to work with. Kind of tangent here, but you're doing ketamine therapy, but cannabis therapy is also another avenue that nurses can take. Daniel McQueen out of Boulder, he runs the psychedelic sitter school, that's what he calls it.
Yeah.
He has a great book too on that. So he was originally waiting for I think so, waiting for psychedelics to become legalized, and then cannabis just became legalized in Denver. So he decided, well, maybe we'll check this out just because it's what we have for now, and then has developed this whole protocol and this whole sort of
it's
school based around using cannabis, and at higher doses it definitely is psychedelic. I've gone to some of his workshops. It's very interesting. So that's another option. Yeah,
I think that's a great place to look if you're living in a state where it's decriminalized or legalized. It's been decriminalized in Washington or legal in Washington for quite a while now. And I think that's kind of an untapped area, truly, as far as being able to work with people and doing some of this support around, changing states of consciousness. And really, if we look at it, people are seeking psychedelics because they are looking for a pattern disruptor. They think that it's going to let them see the world in a different way. And it does do that. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's just that one molecule that does it. One can have an expanded, shifted state of consciousness with the assistance of a plant or chemical or fungus. And they can also experience that through dance or sex or whatever. There's a lot of ways to access this. And I think what they're looking for is by shifting that pattern, they're able to then change their lives for the better, getting unstuck and do something differently. So I think that's what's so important with our role as nurses, is being able to support people through that transition and helping them kind of actualize the experience that they have in an expanded state and put it into what I call sacred duty. So it's the sacred action that they have to do after that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the integration part of psychedelics. People prepare, they go have a journey, and then if they don't do integration work afterwards, you can then you saw the light, but then how do you incorporate those lessons into your daily life? I like that little, what you call it, sacred duty. Yeah, how to maintain that, and having some of the other studies have looked at using group therapy models and other things. So you have a cohort of people, sort of accountability and also support by having this cohort of people with you who are going through this life-changing process. It's in addiction work, we have group therapy models.
That's how I work with my clients with ketamine. Is I run a small cohort, and we do some group meetings. We're not doing ketamine in groups yet. Hopefully someday we'll get to that place, but we do like a lot of that community connection. And then I do one-on-one coaching with them. And then they do individual ketamine sessions, but kind of all at the same time. So there's, 2 on Friday, 2 on Saturday. So they're all kind of like moving through this ship on the ocean, journeying together. And there's something really yummy about that group transformation, even though they might be
Right.
coming from very different places, they find that humanity and that common thread and really support each other. I think it's really healing to do that model.
Right.
I hope there's more of that in the future.
Yeah, the power of just, you're not alone, or you're not alone on this journey. Even when you are, you're still not alone.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
So did you start that model, or was that already at the clinic you were working with? How did that come about?
No, I think, well, I'm sure I'm not the only person doing it this way, but in my coaching practice, so I wasn't working with ketamine when I first started my coaching practice, because I started my coaching practice about 4 months prior to the beginning of COVID. So everything was completely crazy, of course, and doing in-person work just wasn't happening for a while. And then the ketamine work, as it came back online, just started getting so full, and there were so many things that people were working through, that, like, I'm saying the same thing to the person at 2:00 and the person at 3:00 and the person at 4:00. Like, they're struggling with, the details of the things they're struggling with are different, but the root is the same. And I read this really fantastic book called The Community Cure by James Maskell. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but he talks about the future of healthcare really being based in group work, not because we're trying to like get more bang for our buck, but truly because this work seems to, oh gosh, what's the word I want? Not synthesize, but it kind of like, it makes it even bigger. The sum of the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts in this work. And if you've ever been in a group ceremony or done group work together, you can really feel how impactful that is, and you make a connection with people that can resonate beyond just that experience. I mean, I'd say being even in our journey of going through the certificate program together was like that in a lot of ways, to have this cohesion that actually made the learning more impactful over time, and probably our impact in the world stronger as well.
Yeah, that's great. So, oh, that your doggy?
Turn my dog. Someone's coming over. He's not even in the room. He's loud.
I'm surprised my cat hasn't made a guest appearance yet. But,
and the night is not over yet.
So let's see. So you'd already touched on a little bit earlier, but maybe because it's so important to review the self-care practices that you do, before and after sessions and during session. But there's, so much done before and after as well. We talk about how do your body posture in the session, but it's a whole arc of.
Oh gosh. I would not say I am the master of this yet. It's still a work in progress. But things that help me do my work are really good sleep. Oh my gosh. Sleeping, nutrition, and moving my body. Kind of basic, I know, but like, it's so hard to put my own care in front. I think as nurses, we are so good at taking care of others that we tend to really put ourselves last, which, you can maybe do when you're 25, but as you get older, it's harder. It's so much harder to do that. And it's really not worth it. It's not actually helping me serve people better. So it's
not sustainable.
No, not at all. And if I also have to get out in nature. So I have a pretty standard daily routine that I do, a morning practice. I have a morning call that I'm on. I have a happy light on my desk and I shine bright lights in my face, and I move around a lot. I journal and all that. But when I'm getting ready to work with clients, either on Zoom or in a session, I do smudge my space or energetically clear it. I try to clear it between clients. And I also often will go wash my hands. I mean, that's a ritual I think many of us develop in the hospital anyways. You have to foam in, foam out. But there's something about just that, like, kind of stepping out, in from the hall into someone's sacred space and kind of grounding and resetting. I think, mindfully doing that is really impactful. And when I'm beginning my ketamine sessions, when I change the room out, because I do 2 back to back, and I try to do what I can to energetically cleanse the space. So if that's, I do a little smudging sometimes or spritzing of sage. And then just before my clients take their medicine, so I work with lozenges and I do injections before they say yes. I want their full consent before I give them their medicine. But I ask them to come into a kind of prayerful intention setting, just a moment to really like ground in gratitude. And while they're doing that, I will also do that for myself, like conscientiously, like call on my own protectors and ask for support and guidance in this work. So I find that essential to kind of open the psychic space, I suppose. And then I close it the same way. So at the end, we just kind of have a little moment or ring a bell or ring a bowl or something. That might all seem symbolic, but I find for me, it just helps me mark it. It really, otherwise I just feel like I drag some of that sticky stuff home with me or drag it into other parts of my life.
Right.
Yeah, those are the main things that I do.
Right. Yeah, especially love that hand washing. What a great image, and actually, yeah, tangible and practical. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start.
We already do it.
Creating that, yeah, but to do it so intentionally, right, and as a cleansing.
Yeah, it helps. And then also I'm connected to communities, which I think is essential. So connected with open nurses, and then also the different training programs and small communities in my area where I'm able to do kind of consult groups and talk about my clients and the challenges they might, or just kind of process some of that and the ways that I could have served better or mistakes that I made and how I might learn from that. I think that the community piece is a really important part around self-care.
So that's great. Let's see. Yes, you had mentioned, so you use the lozenges and you use injections. I'm saying IM. I mean, I know people are curious about that. Do you have a reason why you use one or the other, or is there pros and cons maybe of those, or duration of action, onset?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think there are a variety of schools of thought around this. So my training, I did 2 ketamine-assisted trainings with Dr. Wilson and then with another training in Canada, and they were all lozenges or intramuscular injections. What I appreciated about that was that it kept it in more of the psychedelic ceremonial realm and less in the clinical medical realm. So there is definitely a practice of doing IV ketamine. For me, I have, as an advocate for birthing women, I have always been super vigilant around how much we surrender our power in the face of medical professionals. Women would just walk in and be like, okay, and kind of surrender their autonomy and actually experience birth trauma. People experience birth trauma and we don't talk about it in this culture, but I really don't want to bring any more trauma into psychedelic work that's supposed to help with trauma. So I really love a model that allows me to have the lowest level of breaking and entering into somebody's body to allow them to have that expanded state experience. So initially, when I first started working with ketamine in a different ketamine clinic, we did everybody IM 1.5 to 1.8 mgs per kg, didn't matter. And I think that it was great in a lot of ways, but also for some people, it was way too much, too fast. And, I could see a situation like that if someone was really, really suicidal or really struggling with depression, like needed the big guns. But as a labor and delivery nurse, I'm always saying that I would rather ease the head out than run back to the OR for a C-section. So I really like this approach where we start with lozenges so people are able to kind of ease their way into the medicine and get to meet it and understand how it feels. And we can then have a better idea of someone's sensitivity to dial in the injections for the next couple of sessions. Plus, it allows me to develop more of a therapeutic relationship with my clients. So they get to know what the session is like. They get to know how to ask for touch and support and how to withdraw their requests for touch and support. It's just a little, I don't know, gentler, I think.
It's like a training ground. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's still really impactful.
It's so profound, right? Yeah.
Yeah. People are still like, whoa, have these amazing experiences. After their first IM session, my clients get a prescription for ketamine lozenges for home use. Now, I know there's some companies out there that will send you ketamine at home to do at home just on your own. That is not what I'm asking people to do with their lozenge prescription. So in the work of our coaching, we get kind of clear about what some of the hallmarks are of when people are moving back into that pattern of stuckness or the depressive patterns. We start to identify some of those sticky places, and we'll use the ketamine at home to help them get unstuck. The whole intention of nursing and of psychedelic assisted therapy is to help people find their internal healing wisdom, right? So I'm really trying to teach them and advocate for them to find their own compass around frequency of use. And I find that my clients use them very infrequently, actually. Some people might be concerned they'd be moving towards addiction, but that's not what I'm encountering at all. In fact, people end up using them less and less. And then the other thing that some of my clients do is they do some ketamine assisted massage. There are some massage therapists in my community that have worked with ketamine themselves and then offer low dose lozenge body work, which has been so transformative for my clients that have some of that embodied trauma, or maybe have had some sexual assault that they need to move through with very trusted, very safe practitioners. And that's a beautiful practice for people. And then they have one more IM session that we do, and people make a big change through that period of time. It's super cool.
So how many sessions is it then?
So for the ketamine
standard,
sessions itself, we do 3. We do 1 lozenge session and 2 IM sessions.
Okay.
I find that it takes a couple of times with the medicine to be able to learn how to navigate it. I think ketamine can reliably dissolve the default mode network. Like, people can get pretty far out there. But I don't know, and I've definitely changed over time with this, I don't know if getting way out there is super therapeutic. I might be a time and a place for it, but I think when people can actually recall an intention during the landing phase in ketamine, or perhaps can encounter a triggering situation without that actual trigger reaction, like they have a little space in the, ketamine lets them look at the trigger and then kind of like look around it and be like, oh, look how I want to react to it, but really I could also make this choice here. That is, I think, the sweet spot of a place to work.
You can kind of take off the emotional weight of the situation. Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of like a different pathway perhaps, but how the MDMA work, with taking the amygdala offline, and then you can actually look at the event that happened without going into a physiological response.
Yes.
So
very much so. I would say, low doses of ketamine are similar to MDMA in that it takes the veil off the heart. It doesn't have the blossoming that MDMA has. It's not releasing the oxytocin and prolactin hormone, but it will soften that. And then at the higher doses, it is more reliably pretty psychedelic. So I think you get a lot. You get a lot out of that medicine. It was definitely not. I was very much poo-pooing it when I first learned about it. I'm like, I don't want to work with that horse tranquilizer. And then I'm like, wow, there's a lot to be done.
There's a lot there,
yeah.
What are the main conditions you see it working for?
Depression and anxiety, mostly. Those are mostly the people I work with. And interestingly, not that I don't know how this happens. People just start showing up that work best with me, right? And a lot of my clients have complex PTSD. So I've ended up working with a lot of people that have childhood trauma. For me, as a labor and delivery nurse, I've always been fascinated with fetal consciousness and how we pattern and attach at a very, very young age. And so it's interesting to me to kind of work with people that maybe need to repattern in a pre-verbal place, or and kind of inviting that perception in and working in that way. And of course, folding in a little bit of IFS stuff too. But, that I would say that it's mostly diseases of despair, man. That everybody's struggling with. pain. I
Right.
do get people with pain, chronic
Mhm.
pain, but yeah,
Okay. Oh,
mostly
great.
the SADs.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we got a couple more questions here, and then there's some questions popping into the chat about ketamine. We'll give them a few more minutes to percolate, and then we'll
Cool.
switch over. So yeah, so now we've talked about how psychedelics are starting to go more mainstream. So what perils do you see coming with that, or things that you should keep an eye on, or exciting things? Yeah.
Heavy sighs. Oh my gosh. It is fraught with peril and also quite exciting at the same time. I think the big thing that's really up for me right now is concern around ethical treatment of people that are in medicine space. I think we have been hearing more and more about boundaries being crossed in that space. And I find it concerning that we means there's just bad players across the board. Sometimes it's a practitioner, sometimes maybe it's a client or a patient, but everybody's freaking traumatized. And so I think there's a lot of risk of learning, if we don't know how to do trauma-informed care, and if we're not in a place where we can speak openly about boundaries and all of this stuff, I think there is some, more risk of harm coming through, which I never want that.
Right.
Of course, I'm also concerned about the capitalization of psychedelic medicine. And even saying medicine, I feel very frustrated by that. So many of these medicine, sorry, I'm saying it again. These teachers, whatever, are, indigenous plants that have a traditional use. And I mean, I gotta say, it bugs the crap out of me when people start saying "aho" when they never know what the hell that word means or where it came from. I was told by an indigenous person to please never use that word. Yet we co-opt so many practices that are not our own, and kind of put this weird, like, spiritual shine on it without doing some of the other work. And I am concerned about patenting certain psychedelics for sale and getting them very expensive. Spravato is a perfect example of that. Johnson & Johnson did the research and showed how powerful ketamine was as an antidepressant, and then went ahead and made Spravato so they could charge $900 a dose. And, granted, it's covered by insurance, but just because something's covered by insurance doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a good medicine. I also think there's a blend of thinking that it's the psychedelic itself that does the work of healing. And that's really problematic. It is a tool for transformation. It is not the transformation itself. So
that ties back to the need for integration. Yeah.
Yes.
I get contacted by family and friends who think, a single dose of something is going to, cure a lifetime of, suffering and, maladaptive strategies for.
And if that happens for you, yay. I'm so happy for you if you take one trip somewhere and you're all better. But that's not really how it works. The other part that concerns me is we do live in a time where there's not a lot of critique about psychedelics. There's a little bit of critique, but not like the more is not necessarily better. Heroic doses aren't really, that's not necessarily essential for your healing. And the stories that we hear about psychedelics are the people that had the mystical experience, or they're the ones that had this amazing connection to nature and the center of the universe. And I think that is really problematic because for people, not everybody has that experience.
Right. People go into such high expectations.
Yeah. And they think they're doing psychedelics wrong.
It's realistic. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wish we'd have more.
Set up for disappointment when you didn't see the rainbow unicorns didn't just appear within 30 seconds.
Yeah, you cried the whole time. That's important.
Right, you probably needed to. Yeah, when was the last time you cried? That was just what you needed.
Yes. Yeah.
So excellent. Okay, so maybe we'll just do one final one and then we'll go to the chat here.
Awesome.
So if you could go back and give your younger self a little bit of advice, what would that be?
If I could give a younger piece of myself, a younger piece, whatever, a
Yes.
younger self piece of advice, I think I would let myself know that it's okay to trailblaze and to find your own path. I am definitely a late bloomer. I came to nursing later. Um, all of these, I mean, I'm still a student, and I think that my life experience would have been better if I had allowed myself to just know that I don't have to have the things like everybody else had. Like, not everybody moves through life at the same pace, and we can find our way at the pace that really works best for us. So I think that would be my biggest piece of advice, is just trust the process that I'm on, and the pace that I'm moving at.
That's great. All right, so let's take some questions here. All right, are there any other nurses who look down on this style of therapy, or is it accepted overall really well?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard to answer because, I think we are in a bit of a, I don't know, echo chamber here in open nurses. We're surrounded by people that are very interested in this work. And so I don't hear a lot of critique from nurses personally very often. I think there's a lot of interest and curiosity in this field. How about you, Wendy? Do you hear much about this?
Not too much, but there is, the risk. They're not, other than ketamine, right? Not legal, or cannabis. It's not legal yet, so a lot of people are afraid of, illegal drugs, putting them all in the same category. Yeah, but it's fairly well accepted. I think maybe almost the danger is overly accepted, because people want to apply these to every possible issue, and they're not necessarily going to fix everything.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi, Tina.
Tina, thank you for listening. All right, so can you comment on some birth trauma? Do you see a lot of rebirthing as a psychedelic doula?
So that's a whole other conversation about birth trauma, because I am not 100% in alignment with Stan Groff's birth matrices, because I think they're very much rooted in how we used to birth babies back when he was born. And I don't think that's really how we birth babies now. Moms used to get twilight sleep and were totally disconnected from their babies, and babies were separated immediately at birth. And there's, birth is really collaboration when left to its own devices. The birth trauma that I saw in the hospital was women who had their boundaries violated, and then also experienced a lot of coercion, which I think is not uncommon. And I think any labor and delivery nurse would probably also share that perspective. As far as rebirthing in the psychedelic arena, I do see people reconnecting to maybe young parts of themselves that they've really disconnected from, that didn't receive the care that they really longed for or needed as a young person. Be that an infant self. I have a couple clients that have, we talk about complex PTSD, that have significant trauma as 1-year-old, 2-year-old babies that they actually have memory of, which is surprising. So, it had to be pretty traumatic if they actually that seared into their mind. And I do see people working through that attachment wound a lot in psychedelic work, which is pretty incredible. People do a lot of healing in that space.
So yeah, I've been in, I was in a holotropic breathwork session one time, the group, and I think 2 or 3 different people were all in the same room, gave birth to themselves. Something in the air. But yeah, very profound. I was like, we were like, why is everyone yelling? So fascinating. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. What do I consider a high oral dose of ketamine? Well, I'm going to say the caveat that everybody metabolizes ketamine differently, theoretically. So we're not talking about drinking ketamine and absorbing it through your belly. We're talking about taking it in your cheek. Although Oh, now it says, what advice would I give my younger self? Wait, where'd it go?
Oh, it went away.
um,
But yeah, so you're talking about a buccal, like
a
a
buccal
lozenge.
administration. It will absorb a bit through your gut, but not that much. So buccally, about 30% is bioavailable. About that. So we usually use between 3 and 500 milligram lozenges. So we're talking like 90-ish.
That absorbs. Okay.
That absorbs, maybe a little higher. But the thing is, some people just don't respond to, they need a higher dose depending on certain medications they might be taking, or depending on how rigid their ego is. And I don't mean that in a negative way, like their ego is holding on for a reason and it's important to honor that. But sometimes people can take a whopping dose and feel nothing. And some people can take next to nothing and just have like this totally expansive experience. So it's a hard question to answer.
Hard one, right? Do you wait a while before you take another lozenge, or do you do it in another session? Or how do you?
No, in the interview portion, we get we do the background information, and I know what medications they're drinking. Also, if they taking, but if they drink a lot of alcohol, ketamine and alcohol use the same liver enzymes to break down. So if, someone's a heavy drinker, sometimes it will be harder for them to metabolize ketamine, or maybe it won't be as effective. So we kind of dial in ahead of time. Generally, I start almost everybody with 2 lozenges because I'm also like, you're with me. You're fine. I got you. Let's go. If you're like super scared, we can do 1, but you're with a nurse and there's a doctor in the other room and you can trip. You're fine. You're safe here. So I usually encourage them to start with 2, and then we swish the spit around for 10 minutes, which is super gross. And then you swallow the spit, which is also super gross. But at the end of 10 minutes, you don't really care that much. And then we wait about 10 minutes and see where they're at. And then usually I'll either have 4 or 5 lozenges total prepared. Sometimes I'll only have 3, but then I'll offer another 2 or 3. And they can say no if they don't want it. Sometimes people do say no, or they'll just take 1 more and they'll swish it for another 10 minutes and swallow it. But we try not to spread it out much beyond that because it just, it's such a short acting drug, which is one of the great reasons why I love working with it, is that I'm not sitting in a, 8-hour whatever session. We got 3 hours to do this process. And so we want to kind of amplify it and kind of catch it on the up. Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's see, we got another one.
Does previous recreational use or abuse with ketamine cause problems for those trying to do actual clinical studies for therapeutic purposes, or is that part of the screening process to see if they qualify there's another sentence to go with that. To see if they are a good fit for this or not. I was curious if previous ketamine use creates a tolerance, thus needing a greater dosage. So I would not be doing ketamine-assisted therapy with someone who was doing ketamine actively and recreationally. Like, that's kind of defeating the purpose. If you already have ketamine, like, me giving you ketamine is not going to help you stop using your ketamine at home, I don't think. Historical use, though, is different. Ketamine does clear out of your body very quickly at anesthesia doses. It's undetectable in blood serum at 11 hours. So it does clear fairly quickly, or at least the metabolites do. So I would work with someone that maybe had a history of use, but I certainly wouldn't want to work with someone that was actively using, because it's like, why? It's not going to really do you any good. Save your money.
But in terms of dosaging, if they've used it previously, would you?
I don't think it really.
You start them you start most people at the same amount anyway.
We'd start the same way, because, like I said, it's really not. I guess it also depends on what we're trying to do. If we're really struggling with depression, I have worked with some clients that have bipolar too, and they've done really well with ketamine. But that's a prescriber decision. That's not a decision that I make at all. But I'm really trying to be like, what are we doing with this? You know,
What's our
why
goal?
are
Yeah.
we quieting your default mode network, and what are we putting back in there? So if someone came and they're just like, I just want to get so high, then that's, there's other
That's
people out there
not
that
what
can
you're
do that for
doing.
you.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm
Right.
doing.
Okay. Oh, the
Wow, the great
perpetual question here. Yeah.
The cutest dog picture too. What
So-
steps should I take to become a psychedelic assisted therapy nurse? First of all, become a nurse. Number
Right.
one in that step. And then I think do some, learn, go to conferences, go to psychedelic society meetup stuff, see if continuing education would be interesting for you, volunteer. I think those are all great places to start to give you an idea of where you might want to land in this field, or where you might want to spend some time in this field. What do you have to add, Wendy?
So yeah, I mean, along those volunteering, we talked about volunteering at festivals, but you can also volunteer or get a job at a ketamine clinic. I know several clinics where they do IM administration, and they need a nurse to just give the injection. It's run by therapists, but they need a nurse to be in the building or to give the shot, and they can stick around and learn and be around it that way too.
Yeah. I'm also starting a psychedelic nurse coaching training, so you can also work with me, and I'll teach you my approach of what I'm doing. Hopefully get you in a position where you can work with people and not just have to inject them. It's more fun to talk to them.
It's a way to get your foot in the door. Yeah,
for sure.
All right. Did we get
See,
most
Devin
of them?
Hey, hi, Devin. Hi.
I think we're mostly overtime now, but
We are. Oh my gosh.
to address, Jessica had asked, we were talking about psilocybin and cannabis in Denver. So Daniel McQueen started his work back when cannabis became legal. So that was like 2014, 15-ish. He's been working with it then. As far as I know, he's not working with psilocybin. And then it's also decriminalized. It's not legalized, and that's a slippery slope for nurses and other people to be involved with. So even cannabis, because it's still not federally legal, but it's legal within the state. So lots of things are becoming decriminalized, and psilocybin therapy is coming to Oregon in a year. So that passed the initiative. So yeah, lots of opportunities. So I think we should wrap it up. But
we should.
So great chatting with you.
So fun. Thank you, everyone. And thanks to Andrew running the tech in the background. Yay.
And we do these every month. So if you have any suggestions for who we should interview too, we generally interview nurses, but we also interview allies. And,
let us know.
Thank you so much.
We'd love your ideas. Well, the dog's barking, so we should probably go.
All right.
Thanks,
guys.
Have a great
night.
Have a
Stay
good
safe,
night.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.